Hello, everybody. Welcome and thanks for attending today's on-demand webinar, Cyber Insurance Premiums Are Soaring. How should MSPs respond? I'm your host, James Slaby, Director of Cyber Protection at Acronis. Let's have a quick look at our agenda. I'm going to start off with an overview of the current cybersecurity threat landscape, then take a look at the roots of the current dramatic changes in the cyber insurance landscape, mainly from the perspective of the insurers themselves. I'll then talk about how MSPs can manage cyber threat risks more effectively as cyber insurance gets increasingly expensive and harder to come by. And at the end, I'll wrap up quickly with some pointers to some resources for future reading. All right, let's start with a quick overview of the key cyber threats that MSPs are going to have to manage on behalf of their clients this year. And of course, these same threats being a big part of the reason that cyber insurance premiums are soaring. All right, so first off, when researchers like Verizon issue their annual report and survey small and medium businesses, it turns out that your clients and prospects are really struggling with a bunch of cybersecurity issues. Known vulnerabilities stay unpatched for months, which leaves the door open for cyber attacks that should be closed because we know what those vulnerabilities are. Problem is these small businesses just can't keep up with the patching process. They don't have the skills or the budget they need to implement the kind of security process automation that MSPs are capable of doing that helps them keep up. They generally don't know how to clean up after an attack or a breach, so they never dig into the roots of the problem and figure out how to prevent it from recurring. They also struggle to integrate their operations and cybersecurity tools in a way that gives them a holistic view of what's going on. And that's something that MSPs very much can do on their behalf. All right, I expect everyone attending this breakout knows how widespread ransomware attacks are. You see the headlines every week. Of course, the ones that make the news are generally the big splashy attacks where the ransoms are tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars, like the Colonial Pipeline shutdown that caused lines at gas stations in the southeastern US last year. This really kind of obscures the fact that fully 75% of ransomware attacks are on SMBs, your clients. That's a stat from the Department of Justice. Software supply chain attacks are now another big problem that we have to worry about, with cyber criminals using popular IT operations and cybersecurity tools, even backup tools, to attack businesses. Of course, that's a nightmare for managed service providers. You're supposed to be their trusted IT services provider, not a conduit for ransomware or data theft malware. All right, I want to look at a few key malware trends here. Phishing as an infiltration tactic remains hugely effective. Something like 94% of successful malware incursions start with an employee clicking on a link or an attachment in an email that they shouldn't have touched. The bad guys are getting more and more clever at evading legacy email security systems. Security awareness training doesn't get through to every employee. The fake emails get more customized and more convincing all the time. Somebody always clicks on something they should. Now we have to worry about SMS, instant messaging, social media messaging as also ways to drop malware. Of course, we know the pandemic forced us all to move a lot of our applications data into the cloud. This exposed the fact that there were issues with our VPNs, our cloud email, cloud DNS, virtual meeting room tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams that we didn't know were there before because we hadn't put them under that kind of stress before. Bad guys have also gotten much better at using beneficial tools for malicious ends. So for instance, once they break into your client's environment with a phishing attack, they'll use the client's PowerShell or Mimikatz or backup administration tools to drop ransomware on other systems, steal credentials so that they can escalate privileges, copy data to offsite cloud repositories they control for what we call the double extortion attack. The other nasty aspect of our abrupt move into the cloud is it also exposed our relative inexperience in managing cloud applications. So we ended up making it easy for cyber criminals to access our tools, made configuration errors that exposed our APIs, our containers, our cloud data repositories, and our backups that we stored in the cloud. Cybercriminals keep innovating their pressure tactics to get victims to pay quickly. They're not just locking up your data and stealing a bunch of it first before they trigger the encryption attack. So now the threat is not just pay us or you'll never see your data again. It's like pay us or we'll sell your data that we've already stolen to people that you don't want to see it. So for a company that's potentially embarrassing, it could expose them to regulatory fines. If they're a public company, their stock price might take a hit, even lawsuits from their partners and customers. So the crooks will even call your clients and say, look, we've stolen your data from this vendor of yours. So call on them and insist they pay us or we'll leak it. That's the triple extortion, where they're using your partners and customers to apply additional pressure on you. Cyber criminals these days are basically operating like a legitimate SaaS company in that they use an army of distributors whose only job is to just get the product onto your machine. This is mainly via phishing attacks. So they're focusing on phishing when they get a bite, and the back-end smart cyber criminals actually conduct the attack to its conclusion and collect a ransom. The distributor gets a commission on it. So it works very much like selling Salesforce.com. This gives ransomware a kind of scale that we never saw before, which explains why in Acronis' cyber tech operations centers, we're seeing 500,000 new malware instantiations every single day. And it's one of the big reasons why cyber insurance claims are soaring. The sheer scale is something we've never seen before. Another new wrinkle we've seen in the past few months is forgo phishing and just bribe an employee to aid in the attack. Why do you need to bash down the gate when you can get an insider to unlock the back door, lead you to the safe, hand you the combination? So much easier. So the insider threat is really raising its ugly head these days again. I alluded to software supply chain attacks before. This is a fairly complicated example of a very sophisticated, widely well-known one on a tool that many of us use for network administration. The important thing is that this kind of thing is going on all the time. Basically, criminals are targeting popular tech operations tools or network monitoring tools or MSP tools that they use to run the business, so that if you compromise that, you can infect hundreds of thousands of targets when they download the next rev of the software, or they get access to the tools that this company with leverage and connections to lots of other companies has. The issue here is that these are the kind of attacks that we used to see only as state on state kind of attacks. The NSA attacking the US's rivals on the geopolitical stage. And now cyber criminals are mounting these kind of multi-stage attacks where they're very stealthy. They're often inside your network for weeks or months at a time, just gaining reconnaissance, very patient, often using zero-day attacks, using your own tools against you. So they're extremely sophisticated, difficult to defend against. There's no way your SMB clients have a chance against that sort of thing. And of course, MSPs ought to be sweating them as well. All right, so a couple clear implications from these trends. One, we always look at this as a tremendous opportunity to reduce your client's overall risk with cyber protection services, a combination of data protection and cybersecurity. To do the things that they clearly don't have the resources or wherewithal to be able to handle themselves. Two, these new threats are clearly one of the big drivers of making cyber insurance much more expensive for your clients as well as for you. So the last thought here is maybe think about how you could take advantage of some new tactics to respond to some new threats. Just one example I'll pull from here is the idea of collecting forensic data from your backups and making sure your clients' backups have been scanned for vulnerabilities and malware before you go ahead and do a restoral to them. All right. Next, I want to tackle some of the root causes of the changes in the cyber insurance market from the perspective of the insurers. All right. So when the insurance industry jumped into this cyber pool a decade or so ago, life was pretty easy for them. They were making big profits. Consumers weren't that sophisticated about what they were buying. Things have really changed in the last few years, again, largely due to the huge surge in the threat environment that I was just talking about. So the ground's really shifted under the insurer's feet. It's getting harder for them to preserve their own profits. Potential intermediaries that used to take some of the hit, like managed security services providers and consultancies, are now wising up and saying in their contracts, look, we're only going to take on so much liability for cyber breaches. So things have gotten much more difficult for insurers. Of course, they're not sitting on their heels here. They're responding to this. And in part, it's things like the Merck case. This was kind of a watershed moment in the cyber insurance business. So you may recall the pharma giant getting hit really hard by one of the earliest ransomware attacks that was a kind of a global, an attack that spread around the world and hit tens of thousands of targets. They lost a huge amount of data. They were offline for weeks. They estimated their losses in billions of dollars. So they went to their insurers and said, look, we need to make a claim against our insurance here to help us recoup some of these losses. And their insurer said, well, actually, NotPetya ransomware was originally designed as a state-on-state attack, not a commercial malware product that was just designed to, force you to pay ransoms. Thus, we consider it a weapon of war, so it's excluded from your insurance policy. We aren't paying. Luckily for Merck, the courts saw it differently, and Merck ended up with a $1.4 billion payout. But that really wised up insurers to the fact that there were fewer ways that they could just get out of paying these ransomware claims. So it should surprise exactly no one that this has driven premiums up. Kind of a perfect storm going on for cyber insurers at the moment. So the number of attacks are scaling up in the ways that I mentioned, thanks to this kind of industrialization of malware production and distribution, particularly around ransomware. The successful attacks are also going up as the criminals get more sophisticated in their techniques, apply double and triple extortion, stealing data first to get you to pay up, whether you can unlock your own data decrypted or not. So the number of claims have gone up. The insurers are having a harder time dodging those claims. So to help stem their losses, of course, they've jacked up their rates. They've also raised the bar for businesses to get accepted into cyber insurance policy or to merit a renewal. So this is a big problem for your clients. Is not only do they have to pay through the nose for cyber insurance, many times they'll be turned away if they don't meet some increasingly strict criteria for how they're securing themselves. All right. So in spite of all these things that the cyber insurers have done to adjust to this kind of new reality, business is still getting less profitable for them. So while they keep raising premiums and keep elevating standards for coverage, their loss ratios, which is kind of their measure of profitability, still creeping up. That's really bad news for your SMB clients. So one example I just pulled here that's fairly typical is that compared to last year, they'll pay twice as much for a premium as they did a year ago, and they'll get about a fifth of the coverage that they got previously. So the value of cyber insurance is becoming much less attractive to SMBs. All right, so let's look at the problem from the perspective of MSPs and particularly what you can do about it. All right, for starters, your SMB clients are the only ones that are facing rising premiums. You are too. You're typically getting cyber liability insurance in the form of tech E&O policies, and those premiums are also going up. The likelihood that your client's going to be breached also means that the insurer is likely to come after you to help recoup their costs. So your client may not be the one that tries to blame you when they get hit, or at least assign part of the responsibility for a successful attack on you as their services provider. But the insurance companies have no qualms about going after providers, and we're seeing that happening more and more. All right. So what does this mean? How do you respond? There's a few things that we see as and are advising our MSP partners to do. So look at this combination of factors. Your cyber liability premiums, your tech E&O policy premiums are going up. Your client's cyber insurance premiums are going up. Insurers are making it harder for both of you to get policies. We see this as a moment for you to reassess the situation and respond in a way that's better for everybody. In other words, try to find the win-win-win in this ugly situation that cyber criminals have kind of put us all in. One, you got to start by helping your clients understand that cyber insurance isn't the cheap, reliable backstop that it used to be. They still need it, but it's not the security blanket that it used to be. So what you want to convince them is that a better risk management strategy and investment going forward is one that will help them shore up their cyber defenses so that they have fewer breaches to deal with. And that's something you can help them with. You can also help them qualify for coverage that way, even though what they can get is more paltry and costs more, they still need it. But you can help them by demonstrating to their insurer that they've taken the steps they need to meet these new insurability standards. You can probably use some of the same tools that you use yourself for this purpose. For one example is a cyber risk framework that I'm going to point you to at the end of this breakout. In the meantime, it's important not to expose yourself with unnecessarily generous commitments to keeping them perfectly safe. It's just not realistic or practical for an MSP to kind of claim or assert that they can defend the client against all possible attacks. So this is where you need to be careful. Define what services are included and excluded in your contract, what might prevent you from delivering them, you know, the classic act of God, or let's say another pandemic. You want to make sure that you document that, what's your responsibility and what's your client's shared accountability for cybersecurity. You don't ever want to accept sole responsibility for their cybersecurity management, only what's included explicitly in your statement of work. So some tactics to consider are limiting your liability to 1 or 2 or maybe 3 months of service fees, and make sure that you're documenting that you're not responsible for consequential damages for any failure to perform on your part. Right? So in your contractual language, you want to make sure that you're not making those kind of commitments. You also need to look at your ancillary materials, you know, the way you describe your services on your website, your other marketing materials, social media posts, email campaigns, online advertising, etc., to make sure that none of that can be misconstrued in a way that your client's cyber insurance policy writer can come after you and say, oh, well, you claimed you would take care of everything and you failed. Since you can't control a lot of the things involved involved in attack, you don't want to take full responsibility. So really be careful about how you represent your services, publicly speaking. This also means that you're going to have to get your own cybersecurity house in order first. You know, put your own mask on before you help others. So basically, you've got to eat the dog food that you're selling. So the ways that we enable our partners to do this is deploy behavioral anti-malware with machine learning, artificial intelligence in it that can tamp down zero-day threats, which is what most ransomware attacks are these days, right? Make sure you're scanning for and patching known vulnerabilities in a programmatic way so that you can keep ahead of, never mind the zero-day threats, the ones that we know about, the ones that patches exist for, right? Get more rigorous about what you're doing for access control. So for instance, make sure that you're using multi-factor authentication, make it harder for attackers to steal credentials, escalate privileges, and so forth. Be diligent about your own backups. Have an incident response plan in place in the eventuality that you do get breached. Make sure you rehearse it, document it, revisit it, update it periodically. Maybe consider implementing true disaster recovery for yourself. Nowadays, you probably need to update your email security services. Legacy emails are proving increasingly vulnerable to the newly sophisticated phishing attacks that we're seeing out there. And again, 90% of attacks plus are getting into businesses through email. somebody clicking on a link or opening an attachment they shouldn't. So you really want to upgrade your security to make sure that those emails aren't actually hitting boxes, so that even someone who's been trained on security awareness, if you're fatigued and processing hundreds of email messages a day, sometimes you click. You can't rely on that. So upgrade that email security. Increasingly, we think it's a good idea to get a better handle on your sensitive data flows. So data loss prevention technology is a good way to do this. Increasingly important so that a terabyte of your sensitive data isn't getting exfiltrated under your nose for use in a ransomware double extortion attack, and you don't even know about it. EDR is another thing on the horizon that we think everyone's going to have to deploy at some point to improve their endpoint protection. So once you've gotten your own house in order, it's time for you to sell your clients on this same notion. And at a minimum, you need to get them to agree to your entry-level bundle of cyber protection services. The logic here is that you can't protect them properly if they're not taking the basic steps. And it's not fair to your other clients if this one client presents a bigger target and is likelier to get breached, and then take your attention in helping them and helping them recover from everybody else who's at least paying for basic cyber protection. Once you've done this, you've gotten yourself your own house in order, you've gotten your client's house in order, you've got it documented, you've used the same checklist on your client and you to show that these are the things that we've done to improve our authentication, improve our network security, improve our endpoint anti-malware defenses, improve our email security, scan for and patch vulnerabilities, monitor sensitive data flows. Now you go to your insurer with documentation of that and say, all right, you need to give us some consideration on our premiums and maybe on our clients' premiums as well, because we, Mr. Insurer, have reduced your risk too. All right, just to kind of wrap it up here quickly, I'll be very brief with my commercial here, but this is the business that Acronis is in. We've got 50,000 MSP partners around the world who are helping to do exactly this with 500,000 SMB client businesses. So our platform will let you offer a very tight bundle of attractive cybersecurity and data protection services in a way that is incredibly efficient for you to deliver and manage. That means you can price it both affordably and profitably, and by the way, have some room to upsell new services, more advanced security services, say, over time. We let you do all that with a single agent on the endpoint, one console to manage it all, single policy for entire classes of users and devices, departments, however you want to do that, with a single license. This is the reason that we've been growing exponentially year by year with the MSP community, because this platform lets them do the kind of things that their clients need to protect themselves, as well as kind of deal with this really nasty cyber insurance issue in a way that you can make money at and win their loyalty and make it easier for you to gain additional revenue through with new services and make those renewals every year much, much easier, really increase that loyalty. All right, in conclusion, I want to point you to just a few resources here. This is among the hundreds of white papers, ebooks, analyst research that we make available in our resource center. So I encourage you to visit that and look for more, but just a few I wanted to highlight to you here. The cyber threats report is some very fresh research of ours that pinpoints the cybersecurity issues that small, medium businesses are concerned about. The MSPs Speak report is a survey, also very recent, of your peers in the MSP business on their hopes and desires and fears around cybersecurity, what kind of services they're thinking about deploying, kind of gauge where you are relative to the rest of your business. Checklist I mentioned before, this is a really fine basis of discussion that you can use with your clients about the kind of cyber protection services they should be thinking about. I also threw in a data sheet there if you want to learn more about Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. All right, with that, I will say support the Acronis Cyber Foundation if you got the desire and the means. We build schools and provide technical training to kids in developing countries all around the world. Your donations really go far there, and it's a really great cause. So we encourage you to support that nonprofit arm of ours. With that, I'll say thanks for taking the time today. Hope to see you at another Acronis event soon. In the meantime, be safe, be well, and be secure. So long for now.